All right, here we go. Bostonian plays video games. We're going to talk about Star Wars, the Rise of Skywalker. And normally I don't do like movie reviews or anything, so it just seems to be getting a lot of negativity. Just wanted to talk about it real quick. So. I think part of the problem is that Disney Star Wars has kind of revealed the prequels to almost be better because it took chances and it was something that was new as far as it did try to create new worlds and explain a lot of the rules of the Force and the lore and all that kind of stuff. And Disney Star Wars seems more concerned with, nostalgia. And it's interesting because after the prequels, it did seem like that's what the fans wanted. Kind of a more... have more of a Star Wars look from the original trilogy, and that's the direction that that Disney went in. So the Force Awakens is very much, I think, like a big fan service film, and we'll go over JJ's work in the Force Awakens and the Rise of Skywalker because to me. There was no risk going on at all with The Force Awakens. I mean, it's very much kind of a rehash of A New Hope. He did introduce, characters that I thought were, for the most part, well done. I mean, you had Rey, who has been exposed as kind of a Mary Sue, especially in the second film. You had Finn. He was a good character, Poe, and all that stuff. And the way that they spread out everyone from the original trilogy as far as like Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill and Carrie Fisher was kind of interesting. I mean, on one hand, I think the idea was to give them each a story over the course of the three films. So you'd have, Han Solo, then you'd have Luke, and then Princess Leia would be the last one. So I understand the idea, but they never really got together. I mean, which is kind of interesting. Now, with this trilogy, it does expose this kind of corporate takeover of artist material. And it's nothing that George Lucas wasn't doing with the prequels, but again, the prequels again have. A moral question at the core of it, which is, selfish love versus compassion, I guess you could say. And the reason why he goes to the dark side is because he chooses selfish love and not compassion. So, I mean, that's a pretty interesting moral arc to the prequels. Where this one is kind of fighting against its own morality, and really the morality that kind of exposes itself is a kind of a corporate morality, which is, what the hell is that? Buying a property and then, sucking it dry. That's basically what it is. So, oh, okay, that's why. So, as far as the Rise of Skywalker goes, I didn't have a problem as much as it seems like everybody else did because, number one, I didn't really go in there with too many expectations, and after the review embargo was lifted, I mean, it was getting killed. It was absolutely getting killed by the critics. So I walked in there. I was like, okay, I don't know what I'm going to see. I mean, I've seen every one of these in the theater, so I'm not going to not see this one. And, I heard he was kind of retconning JJ and, making up for what people didn't like in the, well, that was easy, in The Last Jedi. And I didn't feel that at all. I actually think that Rian Johnson helped JJ out tremendously as far as kind of releasing the pressure of abiding by, kind of this marriage to what the rules of the Force are. Ryan kind of broke those rules in the second film, and I think JJ had some. It seemed like some stress was kind of taken away from what he was going to do. Now, in the film, I mean, it does kind of border on convenience as far as the way that the Force is used. So if you need to get out of a situation, it's like, oh, well, this is how the Force can be used now, and all that kind of stuff, which is a problem. And then, if you really start breaking these movies down like it's 1917 or, Ford versus Ferrari or something like that, I mean, you're going to find a shit ton of plot holes, The other thing that that this film kind of does is kind of expose some of the big mistakes that were going on with The Last Jedi. I mean, when JJ made Force Awakens, I mean, he kind of left the door open for whoever was going to make the next film. He gave them at least some stuff to use. And, Ryan kind of spent an entire film tearing that apart. Now, the good thing is, like, Snoke is bullshit, and Ryan kind of made a statement in the second film, like, this is bullshit, I don't like this. So he killed him off in a pretty cool scene with Rey and Kylo. But the problem I have with The Last Jedi is it's so, in my opinion, overtly agenda-driven that it's tough not to see that, at least for me. I know some people like, oh, I didn't see that, or I didn't see this, or whatever. And normally I'm not looking for what the political agendas are, because I'm hoping I just get to see a story that is thematically interesting. And what is going on here? It's a fucking nightmare out there. Look at this fucking guy. It's a sheep squatch now. Oh, that's... Oh. Okay. I'm down. Yeah. I don't want to join any teams. Yeah. I lost my train of thought, but so anyway, like, yeah, thematically interesting, and I felt like there was a lot of things kind of forced on The Last Jedi that made it kind of boring and just like, what are we doing here? The Rise of Skywalker kind of exposes that, where there's really not much character development at all in The Last Jedi. Like, no one really ends up in an interesting spot. And that kind of hurts the third film, because you don't have like a great cliffhanger in The Last Jedi to like get people excited for the next 2 years about like, where the story's going to go and, what JJ's going to do with it. So, and that's very prevalent watching The Rise of Skywalker. It's kind of like, oh, yeah, JJ didn't have like a shit ton of to do. Or Ryan didn't leave him, a lot of things to kind of play with. So, I mean, I think The Rise of Skywalker is definitely the best of the three, and the reason why is the thing that I think Rian did give to JJ, and I discussed at the beginning of this video, is he kind of took some of the pressure off. He played with the Star Wars rules. He exposed the how difficult it is to please everybody. I think that fans of Star Wars had a valid point because they could see these, in my opinion, again, these overt agendas kind of being forced onto a Star Wars movie, and they didn't like that, and they also didn't like a lot of the decisions that were made. A lot of people don't like, how they treated or Luke Skywalker's story. Rey in the second film is very much, can do anything, extraordinarily powerful, and that's kind of what you're left with for the third film. I thought it was kind of a mess. I'm like, Jesus, I don't know how he's gonna kind of fix a lot of this stuff, and I thought he did a good job. There's not a lot of like JJ bullshit in The Rise of Skywalker. I didn't feel it anyway. Like, when I was watching The Force Awakens, I felt that there was a lot of bullshit in there. There's a lot of fan service. Snoke was like, who is this guy? Like, the First Order is kind of like...
Hey, folks, it's your favorite tour guide, Dick Shale. Appalachia
What the hell is this?
Historical landmarks worth visiting while you're in the area. Today, I'd like to tell you about Philippines Battlefield Cemetery, where the first land battle of the Civil War took place. Learn more about this important chapter in Appalachian history when West Virginia was still a part of Virginia. Make sure to stop by the museum to see all the authentic uniforms, weapons, and equipment actually used in the Civil War. We'll see you there.
That's pretty cool. Picnic table set. Yeah, so Snoke was kind of bullshit. The First Order was like, okay, what are we doing here? I mean, we're just kind of like, why does this exist? Like, what happened, like, to get back to this point? After the Return of the Jedi, it was a big victory, and now all of a sudden we have this, fascist kind of government that it just seemed like, not very genuine. That's what I like about The Rise of Skywalker, is that it seemed like very, and the one major thing that does kind of trouble me a little bit about the film is Palpatine. It's kind of like, all right. I mean, he killed off Snoke, so you need something, I guess. I mean, I think it could have been more. It could have been more about Kylo, and after Snoke is dead, and not bring back Palpatine. So I was kind of, it kind of was one of those, again, kind of Snoke-esque things where it's kind of like, all right, are we forcing this into the story? Like, and it plays with the overall story. If you look at them, all nine films, it's kind of like, well, Anakin was the one redeemed by throwing Palpatine down a well, pretty much, or whatever. And now he's like kind of back in this, kind of disingenuous way, just to get these characters to a point of redemption. It's kind of like, okay, fine. But the scenes with Palpatine I thought were pretty cool. I like the arena. I like, I like the way that his face is edited, so it's almost like, well, I mean, this doesn't seem like the real guy. This is kind of just, I don't even know if Palpatine is really alive, and I like that. But for the most part, I thought it was just a pretty cool cinematic experience, and it actually made the characters the best that they've ever been in the trilogy. Like, Rey is great. I thought Kylo was great. I thought Poe and Finn were really, good, and there was actually character development. And again, it kind of exposes The Last Jedi for not really developing the characters at all. Like, no one gave a shit about Rey and Finn, and that's Rian Johnson's fault. I mean, I'm looking at on Twitter, I see a lot of people are putting The Last Jedi as their second favorite film behind Empire Strikes Back. I mean, a lot of the rankings now that the ninth film is out puts Empire Strikes Back, The Last Jedi, and A New Hope. Where I'm kind of like, I mean, I've watched The Last Jedi a couple times. There's absolutely no way that the only reason why I would put it behind Skywalker, The Rise of Skywalker, is because I think that the risks that Ryan took helped JJ approach the material. And again, it's amazing to me, like, how many people are ripping the film apart. And I think a lot of people are kind of like just sitting down in the theater ready to rip it apart. I've seen some videos actually where the whole theater is like yelling at the screen because she calls herself a Skywalker, which I didn't really have a problem with that either. It's kind of like, okay, well, at least thematically, there's kind of a message here that you can choose one way or the other, to be good or evil or whatever. And so again, I didn't have a problem with that. I liked a lot of the action scenes. A lot of people think it's too fast paced. I didn't have a problem with that either. A lot of people think there's too much going on in the movie. I didn't recognize that at all. I kind of had fun on the journey. A lot of people are saying that JJ was like spending time, trying to fix things from The Last Jedi. I didn't get that at all when I watched it. I felt that JJ really didn't disrespect Ryan's work at all. I think he paid homage to him a lot for kind of passing the baton back, and kind of. I feel like if JJ did all three, it just would have been exactly like the first trilogy. I have a feeling. I just think that he would have done exactly what George Lucas did for Empire Strikes Back, and then he would have done exactly what he did for Return of the Jedi. I just think that was the way it was going. A lot of people are blaming Kathleen Kennedy for not having an outline like Kevin Feige does. I don't agree with that either. I think that I think it's kind of an interesting approach, and I think the original idea was JJ sets it up, and then Ryan would do what he wanted with the film, and then Colin, I think his name's Colin Trevorrow, would do what he wanted. And to be honest with you, I mean, those are some pretty solid directing choices, because Colin Trevorrow did Jurassic Park, so it's very kind of campy and lighthearted and fun, and that's kind of what Return of the Jedi is. Rian Johnson's kind of a more serious, not in his storytelling because he tells a lot of jokes, but he's kind of more of a darker filmmaker, and that's a good choice for the middle, I think. And then JJ does have this kind of like lighthearted New Hope style that works. So I don't think any of that was a problem. I think in a lot of ways that kind of sets itself up to be more interesting. But The Last Jedi, it's actually a bigger misstep than people want to admit, I think. For a lot of reasons, and it also kind of started this movement to go against the fans and kind of call them names like toxic and this and that, and the fact of the matter is that isn't a incorrect assessment of how people were reacting, but I also think it just kind of generated this new relationship between intellectual properties and the fans. It's actually quite weird what's kind of transpired over the last 2 years with The Last Jedi. Now, if you're a company and you do a movie and people continue to talk about it over the course of 2 years without spending a dime, I mean, that's pretty good. And the fact of the matter is, JJ created that as well, because he put so many Easter eggs in The Force Awakens that people were talking, there were fan theories, but that was more fun. That seemed like it was a little bit more fun, and people had their criticisms with The Force Awakens, as I did. I kind of felt it was a boring movie and forgettable. And there's elements of Skywalker that's the same way. I mean, it's popcorn entertainment. It doesn't go very deep as far as as far as the storytelling is concerned. I mean, it's not like The Shining or anything. It's not like even Empire Strikes Back. It's not trying to explore big ideas. It's really just trying to give characters things to do and kind of create a spectacle out of it, which I think is very successful in doing that. And I'm sure there's some Easter eggs that I didn't pick up in the first viewing, but really what I wanted to see was, I was rooting for JJ to make a good film and to be a filmmaker and not be this kind of corporate guy who just does sequels and stuff like that. So I was hoping that there was kind of a message from the filmmaker underneath all the images. And one thing I will say about The Rise of Skywalker again is that I felt an honesty that I didn't feel with The Force Awakens, and that's what I appreciate about the film, and that's why I definitely think it's the best one of the three. Rian Johnson, as much as he defends himself, there does seem to be a kind of disrespect, and I think his ideas for that is good. On one hand, it's kind of like, it's time to grow up. It's not time to be wallowing in nostalgia and claiming that people are ruining their childhood or whatever the fuck. I mean, that's that shit is crazy. I mean, that shit is crazy. But again, and it does. He took risks, but it does feel like a fuck you. In many ways, which, and it's not like a good one. It's not like, hey, I'm with you, let's all grow up together, you know what I mean? Let's all just, like, put this behind us. And, there just seemed to be, like, no... I don't know, it was kind of disrespectful, I thought. But again, people seem to really like it. There's great set pieces, and, the Kylo and, Rey fight is pretty good, obviously. Probably one of the most memorable Star Wars moments in history, I think. There's nothing. If you ask me to remember something from The Force Awakens, I honestly can't even do it, you know. For the Rise of Skywalker, I liked her pulling the ship, and then Kylo comes in and pulls the ship. I thought that was kind of cool. That was a cool moment. The Palpatine stuff I remember. So I don't know. I mean, it's getting a lot of hate, and I think it's just I think it's a very interesting. Now, of course, I mean, I've gone out of my way to look at Twitter and see how people are reacting to the film, and you know, and then all of a sudden this video comes up where, you know, people are freaking out, like really angrily yelling at the screen and stuff, and I'm like, whoa, dude! It's amazing that you know, people care that much, and really, I mean, the other thing about this, unfortunately, is, you know, people don't care anymore. You know, I mean, when I was going into the movie, I didn't care about any of the characters. I mean, I didn't really care about Rey. I thought, okay, well, let's see what they do with Kylo, because it seems to be, you know, his redemption story anyway. And he probably was the best part of the trilogy, Kylo Ren. I mean, I think his story was probably the most interesting, and I think, you know, I think it is his story anyway, you know, period. So, at least that's what I, you know, kind of came to find out. But, yeah, so, I don't know.